Hi everyone, welcome to The Grind. We are studying the book of Jonah, and I believe that, we grew up in Sunday school and we're very familiar with Jonah, and we know it's always like Jonah and the whale, but it's actually a big fish. And I think it's really cool to just study this book, I guess, as an adult. I think it's been a while since I read this, Jonah in such detail, and so I've just been getting a lot out of it, and there's really great depth in this book. So if anything that we're learning so far from Jonah is that one should not run away from one's responsibilities and calling in life. So quick question, how does God normally get your attention?
I think sometimes I can hear God very clearly, but I think sometimes I actually just completely zone him out. I feel it really varies. There are some times where I'm pretty much doing nothing, just doing my daily routine, and sometimes God would usually chime in and hey, try to talk to that person, So I can do that, but at the same time, on the other hand of the spectrum, I think sometimes I might be really distracted, focused on parties or talking about movies or gaming. I think in those scenarios, I just, like I said, I zone him out. So I think it really, it's a range. Sometimes I can hear him whisper, and then sometimes I don't hear him at all. But I think a really obvious way for me to hear and listen to obey God is when I'm constantly keeping my ears open for him, actually actively all right, it's God, okay, checking in to see if God's speaking, rather than oh, my life, I want to do this.
Actually, for me, I was going to say that it's easy for God to get my attention. Sometimes when I'm reading the Bible, I'm like, oh yeah. Or when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see those reels where they talk about Bible verses and also just explain some things about the Bible, I'm like, oh yeah. And then through worship sometimes it's yeah, praise the Lord. I gotta return back to my first love. But sometimes, as you said, when I'm distracted or in the middle of, escaping reality, it's hard as well to tune in to God, basically. But when I actually go obey and do something, carry it out, is definitely, as I said before, when multiple people say something at the same time, and when there's a theme going on in my season.
Sometimes God can speak to me through people, or I think even if I'm going through something and if I process it with someone or even with him, that's how he speaks to me about that situation. It could also come through just words that that stand out to me. I guess that's a matter of hearing God's voice, right? Sometimes it could just be that. How sometimes when you're crossing the road, you're not paying attention, and then you hear a wah. Yeah, sometimes that happens in my life too. So God could also use I think situations to kind of get my attention as well. So I think God does work in very different ways sometimes. I wouldn't say it's a one thing fits all to grab our attention. So,
and actually sometimes when some things don't work out the way you want them to, sometimes oh no, God, what do I do? And
then that's where he's yep, I was trying to get your attention. So here we are. So here's another question then. When or where is it easiest for you to listen and obey God?
I kind of remember that, especially when I'm about to do ministry, I always tune into him. I think it's pretty obvious, right? It's when you're actively waiting, when you're in the place of waiting, that's of course when it's going to be easiest to hear God, I feel. So like I said, ministry, when I'm about to approach something, or especially when I know we dedicate a time to pray for something, I kind of get my, you know how athletes, right before their competition, they kind of put in music and they just zone in.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the equivalent with God, is that right before that's how I kind of zone in, get in the zone with God.
Actually, same. The easiest time for me to listen to God is when I really need a prophetic word sometimes. Or just before prayer, it's what does this person need? And other times it's when I dedicate time to spend with him.
Yeah, so it's, the common ground is being proactive and
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's also easiest when you're we're also with people where there's like the atmosphere of faith, where everyone's already like hearing from God and there are already things happening. So I feel like in those situations it's really easy to listen to God. I think when you surround with people who like don't really have faith or don't really believe that God can speak, I don't know, for me it can be a little bit contagious, and it can affect me hearing God. I mean, I know technically we're supposed to be the ones setting the culture, setting the thermostat, but sometimes it just feels like it does affect you if you're with people who are like, no, God doesn't speak, or they're just skeptical, or they're just full of doubt. So, and then I think when things are going good, then it's easy to listen to God. It's like, yes, all is well. I can listen to God. I can hear His voice. So that would be certain situations. But I would say listening to God can have its like high moments where it's super easy, and moments where it's not easy at all. So, but I think at the end of the day, when God speaks to us, is really to also have us turn to Him, to have that relationship with us. Now, I think God did speak to Jonah clearly, like go speak to the Ninevites, but he didn't even respond to God. He basically was like, bye, and went.
Bye.
Like went the other direction. It's like God spoke to him. It's like, huh? Sorry. I think that was what? Was there someone speaking? And then he just like turned and took off. And so here you have Jonah, probably not in the most opportune position in his life, being on a boat. And then being hurled into the ocean. And then being swallowed by a fish. So, how bad does your circumstances have to be before you turn to God?
Yeah, I'll admit, I do have a bad habit of only going to God when I need it. Like when it fits my convenience, you know. It's especially like in times where I like control, so it's when I'm out of control. Like when if things circumstances are out of my control. Like there are factors I cannot control. I am way out of my element. And I think another area that I really like automatically turn to God is when I'm in a place of discomfort and I just want to get out of it. Like we just talked about in the last grind, like we were so desperate, what did we do, right? And then for me, I was talking about that airport experience, and I was like, just get me out of here. It's that place of desperation. I think that's how bad it gets before I go to God.
I think for me,
Oh my gosh.
Nowadays I really do try to turn to God no matter my circumstances. So in the past, I would be just like you, like only ask God whenever I need help. I've seen a reel where it's like the guy opens the door and then it's like God is like, hi, nice to meet you, and then it's like, hi God, so here's what I need you to help me do, and it's like, sure, I can help you, but how are you, by the way? And then he already left. And that really hit me. It's like, is that really a relationship, or is that just
Yeah, you're to some extent you're taking God for granted.
Or is it a vending machine relationship?
Ooh.
I mean, I've definitely taken God for granted before. It just came to me when I needed stuff. I mean, sometimes like if I need to process something, or like trying to figure out what's the next step to take, like I involve God with that as well. I would say, however, that I do need to create more space to allow God to speak into my life. When things are tough, yes, I run to God, but I also have this tendency sometimes, like if He doesn't respond, then I also don't go to Him as well, because I feel like sometimes at the back of my mind, like I've already been to you. There's nothing happening. Like, what's the point of me even bringing this up again? So, like, I've seen, like, sometimes I journal my prayers, and then when I look at some of my prayers, it can be really almost repetitively, like, dark and depressing. It's like I'm saying the same thing, and it feels like God doesn't answer. It's just almost like day after day. It's like, what's the point of me continuing down this path? So there's definitely been seasons of that as well.
And also, I have friends where they would wait for a special event, like for example,
like
river
a camp or something.
Until they open up their hearts and repent and go back to God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm always thinking like, why can't it be today? Why can't it be now?
Got to be the right atmosphere, the right
Yeah.
temperature, the right
Yeah.
people, the right song,
Closed off
and then
space, a different
yeah,
island.
exactly. And then it hits, and then boom, yes,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, you cry and then you come back to real life. Oh,
Yep, I'm good, thanks.
I'm good.
But that's also like we don't want like that mountaintop experience all the time. I mean, sorry, if we're just chasing the mountaintop experience, we're not gonna be able to experience God when we're in the valleys. So it's like, how do you maintain a relationship with God no matter like what season or journey on the mountain you're on? So if you're going to like say a camp just to chase that feeling, it's never going to last because you're not going to be on a camp like
Every day.
every single day,
Yeah.
like in another island with this group of people singing
Yeah.
that one song. So that's something to think about as well. So Jonah was, I guess God got his attention through a storm, through a fish. So now you have Jonah just in the belly of a whale or fish or whatever.
Yeah.
I keep thinking it's a whale. It's just habit. I've just
Program from
I've been
childhood.
programmed
We've been
from
fed.
It's all the Sunday school.
yeah. So it's only within this fish where he finally cries out to the Lord. Not even when he's on the boat. He's like sleeping on the boat. Not even when on the boat where he's like, he doesn't cry to God to like stop the thing. He only cries out to God when he's like in this situation right here. So, but I guess that can also be relative like to not relative, that's not the word, reflective of where we're at as well, because I think being stuck in a fish, obviously one can say that that's like the worst place to be.
Yeah.
And then on shore is a better place to be.
Yeah.
So I guess like the question would be, how are your prayers different inside the fish and from the shore? Because I could imagine Jonah's prayers to be completely different.
That's a good question. I think if I reflect on the comparison, I feel my prayers in the fish are more of a begging kind of style. Like I'm like, God, please, or please do this, God, you know. It's almost in the, I think that I have gone to the extent of almost like kind of like guilt tripping God, like God, I'm suffering here. Don't you love me?
Yeah.
No, I've never said that,
Yeah.
but you get the extent
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to. And yeah, I'm like, and sometimes I forget to do like the right prayers. Like I feel one of the most like personal example is that like in healing, you know, when I start getting desperate, like when I'm praying for someone, it's like, oh yeah, God, yeah, I command life, you know, I release peace, da 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 da. But when I feel it's like if it's me, I get more like desperate. I'll be like, God, please do this, please do this. Like it's no longer me. Like I could be saying like I declare life over myself. I command like if I have cancer, I command this cancer to go. You know, I could be more declararing. I can be more declaring, but when I am in the belly of the fish, it'll be like it's more of God, please come on, do something, God. I'm here waiting. Do something. You know, yeah.
I want to take this to another perspective where it's like, instead of a very difficult situation, it's a place where it's completely isolated from your normal daily life. And I was just thinking back at RAMP, which is River Camp, where we are isolated from our everyday life and the distractions that take away that vulnerability I have from God. And when I'm at the camp, when I fully open my heart, I start to see myself fully believing as well. So my prayers go from, to answer the question, it goes from, God, I completely believe that you'll do this right now, or I patiently wait for this to happen, or God, let your will be mine as well. Or I don't know, I might even pray, remove like toxic people from my life. You know, when you pray that prayer and then the next day it's like, oh, where's my best friend?
I don't know, man. Is there someone that you want to talk about specifically?
No specific people. Just kidding. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the difference would be the amount of full confidence I have in God when my heart is fully open. But I think it's hard to fully open up your heart when you're not in the
Yeah.
big fish or in
Yeah.
a different situation.
Yeah, when you're like in a really dark situation, yeah, your prayers are more begging. They're more like desperate. They're more like, just get me out of here, right? Like you mentioned about your whole London situation, like trying to get out right, on like any flight. Like
Yeah.
I think something like almost carnal takes over you in a sense.
Yeah.
It's like no filter. It's like whatever poise that you might have is gone. I've definitely broken down before God before in like the most I don't even want humans to see me that way, that kind of thing. It's not pretty. And like yeah, God has seen my ugly tears, and ugly crying is a thing. It's also very therapeutic as well. So then when you're like say praying from shore, right? It's more put together, it's more collected. Like everything's gone your way. It's almost like it becomes more like not the real you, I suppose. At times, it's just more like a yes, this is the right thing to say. Whereas like when you're inside like the belly or like like that tough time, it's more like I guess it really shows your true self.
Yeah.
Like are you and then it boils down like are you pursuing God because you truly desire him, like, and you know that he is the answer, or are you just pursuing him because it's like just trying to get out of something. Like I think it really highlights I guess your real self, like what you're truly feeling, but also allow like whether or not you're allowing yourself to be very real and vulnerable as well. Because sometimes people might think I can't tell this to God too, and they have this facade of like having things all put together anyways, despite being in the belly of fish or like praying on shore. Yeah, that's something to think about as well. And when Jonah was in that whale, he was 3 days by himself. No mariners, maybe a floating seaweed, I don't know.
2 shrimps.
2 shrimps, chilling there. I mean, just imagining it's darkness, right? Because it was in the belly. So, yeah, let's take a moment and talk about solitude, because that's probably some quietness that he has there.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever like just sat before God in silence?
Yeah, I recall because it was actually that was how God taught me how important it is as well. I think this was before one of my ministry. I think it was Rock. We had the outreach kind of thing, and then I was in the location early, and I was like, "All right, God, come on, what do you want to highlight someone you want me to speak to? Give me a word that's gonna be meaningful to them, so that they could just encounter you." I'm very like being proactive. Like, God, tell me what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
And I just remember God going like, "All right, go to this bench." I'm like, "Bench, okay, I see the bench," and I go there, and he goes, "Sit down." All right, yeah, sitting down, and he goes, "Chill," and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, and then I just followed along. I just plugged in my music, literally in public. It feels weird to be in public, just close your eyes and just sit there. But I think that's kind of what I did. Was that like I was wanting God to use me, but then God was saying like, take a break, and just reflect and just be with me right now. Don't have to overthink. Don't have to be extra. Yeah. That's kind of how God kind of taught me the importance of like. I think this is basically kind of like the same level as respecting the Sabbath. I feel. Yeah.
I love being alone. I think growing up in Hong Kong, there are so many times, as in like not even so many times, just every day, just encountering so many people. Even on the streets, you might bump into 1 or 2 people you know. And admittedly, like for example during COVID there was so much alone time, and I was like so happy about the alone time because I get to do all the stuff I wanted to do. I get to watch this show, read these books, and work at home alone. And so admittedly when I'm at home I don't typically proactively set aside time for God. But when I'm alone and I'm around nature or like outside, I just start zoning out for a bit. And I think zoning out is so important nowadays. I just think about it, I'm like, it's so important to just zone out once in a while. And when I do that, I just think about, oh my gosh, these birds are so wonderfully created. They just, so typically when I'm around nature, I'm more in touch with God, I think, in my solitude.
So I was listening to this podcast about solitude, and then they're saying that without solitude it's impossible to have a spiritual life with God. And they're like thinking, and they're saying like, yeah, introverts, yeah, they love solitude. It's like, you know, but it's not like time to go off and do your own thing. Like, oh, being waiting for people really is being with God, because they're talking about how like when Jesus was baptized, immediately he goes into the wilderness by himself, right? And then so that's, I guess that was like such a significant time as well, where he probably conversed with God and had time with God. And then so I know solitude for us is like, what does it look like, right? By time by ourselves. But if we strip back everything, it would technically be silence. It would technically be there was, because in our alone time we're thinking, okay, have my Bible, have, you know, some worship music, have some whatever, and then just be in my space and no one can bother me. But what if we even dialed it back even more? What if we took away the worship music? We took away anything. Maybe we took away, for, I know this is controversial, take away the Bible for just a bit and just has this space of pure silence and solitude, and where we tune into God. Like, can we do that? That is something to think about, because for me, doing that can be a challenge. Like, I'm like, you gotta like feel as though you gotta put A, B, C together to get to cultivate the presence of God before we can worship, right? Like, let me put in some worship music, let me do this. But then what if like we took away everything and just in complete quietness, like listened to God, spoke to God? Maybe just listen to God first, then speak to him, because that's what Jonah was in the belly of the fish. There was no worship music, there was no teaching, it was just pure quiet. And I guess that's where he probably had some time with God. So I think, yeah, it's I think practicing solitude is something that's also, like, I wouldn't say I'm pro at it, it's something I'm still growing in, and just to be sitting in the presence of God in quietness. And I think when I do that, it's almost like then your soul is inclined to worship, because you really sense God's presence there. Because like, I think where the presence of the Lord is, there is that desire to respond in worship. It's a natural response. So it's when you create solitude, like, you know, have that space, like your heart just naturally responds in worship. So you don't even have to create like the worship song or listen to the worship song. It's already there. So yeah, so then, all right, let's go back to Jonah a little bit, where he was quite desperate. So here's a question. Have you ever prayed or heard someone else pray, Lord, if you will do this, I will blank?
Isn't that sort of testing God or putting him in a box?
Like, as in, trying to use him like to our desires, like, okay, if you do this, I'll do that kind of thing, like,
Yeah.
like cause and effect kind of deal.
Yeah. And that's also very conditional.
I think it goes back to like the temptations that Jesus faced, right? I think that's kind of where we first got the do not test the Lord your God. That's kind of like where it's most well known at. Because, okay, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's Gideon, who was kind of like testing God so that he can get some encouragement to get his faith grown, I feel. And I think on the other end of the spectrum is kind of like taking God for granted. So you could be like, you're going to do something very reckless that might get you hurt, but then you're like, you know what? God says he loves me, God's going to protect me, so I'm going to do it regardless. It really goes down to the heart intention, I feel. Do you really, are you really at a place that you need something extreme to happen to grow your faith out? Or are you just kind of like using God as like a, you know, like a safety net? I guess that's kind of a way of drawing the line.
So for example, if I'm like, God, if you're real, give me a thunderstorm right now.
I think God will see where you're at in his journey with him. Because I mean, we look at the story of Gideon. He tested God, like, oh, God asked him to do something, and it's like, okay, if you do A, then I'll do it. And then God did A, and then he's like, okay, fine, if you do B, then I'll do it. Then God did B, and then so basically you have Gideon who was testing God, and then finally he's like, okay. Then at the end of it, it led to obedience. It wasn't even proving that God was real. It was more of like kind of like showing him like, is this really the way to go? Because you had Gideon going through really doubt. Like he doesn't exactly have the most like highest like self-esteem, and also he's from like the lowest of all tribes at that moment. So and he's being asked to go save people from the enemy. Like, I think that's just a huge task. So I think he needed some affirmation that this really is from God, that he's not making things up.
Yeah.
So there was that heart intent. But if I'm here saying like, oh, if you're real, like do this, I mean, again, it really depends on the person's heart. Like I think I may have mentioned this before, like when I met a survivor from the tsunami in Thailand, and when he prayed, he was caught in the wave, right, this pool cleaner, and he said that God, if you are real, you will save me from this, or if there's a God, they will save me from this. And he was saved. And so he pursued like, okay, who is this God, and ended up working for the pastor of the village. So I think that was a legit prayer to prayer, because he had no idea who God was. He was just like, if there is a God, or if God, you're real, you will save me. So I think God really sees the heart's intent when you're praying prayers.
Yeah, because that's kind of me. Not in this phrasing, but I kind of go like, all right, God, if you open the opportunity, I'm gonna go for it. Like, especially when it comes to ministry, I'm like, all right, if this person approaches me, I'm gonna talk and ask me a question about this topic, I'm gonna talk about this. Or like, if this my most common one is like, if he speaks English, I will talk to him. If he speaks Chinese, I'm not going there. So that's kind of, I feel that's almost around the if A happens, B will happen kind of thing.
Okay.
Like when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, I'd say like, God, if I'm meant to do this, then you're gonna make it clear to me. Or like I even gave a specific thing. I said like, oh, this person's gonna come talk to me, and that specific person came to talk to me, because I was genuinely seeking direction for my life. I truly don't know. And I think that time I read the story of Gideon, so I was like, okay, what I read in the Bible, I'm gonna practice. And then I said, okay, God, if this is gonna happen, I did also even ask for something like dumb, like the weather, right? Oh, it will be sunny or something like that, and it was. So that was like in the beginning stages where I'm trying to like tune in my ears to hear God. But then when I tried to pray this kind of prayer, like like I guess in recent years, it's almost like God's like saying, you can hear my voice. Why are you even praying prayers like that? Because he knew the heart intention, because I just didn't want to do the work of like, really making the right decisions. More like, okay, fine, God, you tell me what to do. So hey, if I'm supposed to do this, do that. I think with Jonah, if he was really questioning whether that's a call from God, he could have asked God, like, if you want me to go, like, show me a sign or do something.
Yeah.
But
he was
like,
too scared.
Yeah, he was like, because he's afraid of God.
He's like, nope.
Yeah, because he knew what God was going to say. So that's why he was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like when we're praying, like, God, if you want, if I do this, like, will you do that? Sometimes we already know the answer because we want God to say no, and so we pray that kind of prayer, thinking like, I think Jonah probably thought he was going to pray that kind of, like he was going to pray that kind of prayer. It's like, I'm not going to bother. I'm just gonna peace out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we don't want to be pushed in a situation where, like, we only pray and obey God when we hit the bottom. I mean, I think being in a whale was, fish. I keep saying whale. Being in the fish, it was probably rock bottom for Jonah. Yeah. So, yeah, we don't want to be people who don't pray and don't obey God until like it's really like the worst situation ever. Yeah. So, but those are a good question, like something to think about. Like, when are we testing God? When are we actually like truly asking God for help?
Then what about proving if God is real to a non-Christian friend? I think.
I mean, this kind of came up to my. I just recalled this as you guys were discussing it. Like I think it really goes back to the verse, like, whoever, if you wait, is this the Bible verse? Seek and you shall find.
Yes, it's the Bible verse.
Right? I don't know why I just doubted my second for a second. That was my second for a second. Because one scenario I feel kind of like reassures that is that recently there's been so many Muslims who were having dreams of Jesus. I think it's because they were actively seeking like truth. What is the truth? And I think because of that active seeking, Jesus revealed himself to them.
Yeah.
Like lots of them, same scenario, having a dream, like Muslim having a dream, seeing Jesus, and they know it's Jesus. That's the interesting part. So I think if it's to really grow out the faith, seek and you shall find.
Yeah, because I don't think Jesus is going to be like, oh, surprise, here, I am Jesus, like, and kind of prove himself. Like, he doesn't need to do that. I mean, in the wilderness, the devil asked him so many times and said, like, oh, if you're the son of God, turn this into stone. I mean, he could very well do it because he's like, I can feed myself just fine.
Yeah.
But he wasn't like stepping up to those tests because he's like, he knows not to put the Lord to test as well. So saying like, oh, God, if you're real, show this person you're real by sending this. I don't think God's going to do that. Yeah.
I mean, and also to just recall Elijah, right? To prove God is real, God goes, send down a fire, just like a fireball.
So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, send a thunderstorm.
Oops. Did
You're gonna have a typhoon tomorrow with Zoe.
Who are you trying to prove Jesus to? But yeah, I think with that being said is I think God can use any situation to speak to us. There's always redemption. There's always compassion. No matter where we're at, there's always like like a time where we can always turn back to God, where maybe there are like different signs or milestones in our lives that might happen. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's where God spoke to me. And I don't think God is going to be like, oh, you tested me by praying this prayer, I'm not going to listen to you. I think really it's all about the heart and where you're at, and are you able to be honest and be vulnerable with your situation with God as well. And obviously we don't want to be people to be hitting rock bottom and then be like, okay, Lord, like help me out. I don't think that's ever God's heart. God's heart was really for Jonah to go reach out to the Ninevites. He did not want to see Jonah like run away, but sometimes he has to use something drastic, like, okay, you need to come back.
Yeah.
To
Reel him in.
You're going the other direction, and I need you to go speak to the Ninevites. And maybe God could have used someone else. He could have used someone completely different. But I think he loved Jonah enough to bring him back, and he, I guess, had that. And we know that Jonah had a relationship with the Lord because he said that he feared the Lord, and there's no chance that he would say he feared the Lord if he didn't have a relationship with him. So I think God was just more like, let's just bring it back, and put him in the situation where he just like responds to me. So
it's very humbling to think that God could use anyone else, actually.
It doesn't have to be that person specifically, but he wants to use you. So it's more like, would you partner with him?
Yeah, you're not necessarily, what's that? You're not expendable, but it's more like, hey, I have this plan for you. Go for it. Because if you don't go for it, someone else is going to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we're not meant to have the savior complex. We're not going to be savior to all people, but God wants to partner with us. And it's more like, will we step up to that call? So, yeah. Well, that's that. Some interesting questions that's been raised and discussed, and I think there's definitely a lot to think about when it comes to like prayer life and solitude, and is it like testing God versus really asking Him for something, for a sign. So yeah, I think it's something that we will discover on our own in our own journey with the Lord.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's that for today. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Grind, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.